Okay, so we're into the home straight now, where we're just going to look at the alternatives in issue paper 10 on narrative reporting. As with financial statements, we're just going to have a quick look at the international guidance before we do that. So IFRS standards don't themselves address the issue of narrative reportings within the standards themselves. But the ISB in 2010 issued a non-mandatory practice statement called management commentary, but that does cover this issue. And the ISB is in the process of revising the practice statement, and it's sort of now live for comments. The IFRS for SME standard similarly doesn't specifically include narrative reporting, although the non-mandatory practice statement that I just referred to is available for use when following this standard as well. Likewise, IPSAS do not specifically address the issue within the standards themselves, but IPSASB has issued non-mandatory material in the form of recommended practice guides. I think there are two recommended practice guides that are relevant here. The first is recommended practice guide 2 on financial statement discussion and analysis, which covers some but not all of the issues covered in the ISB's practice statement. It focuses on an explanation of the significant items, transactions and events presented in the entity's financial statements and the factors that influence them. And there's also recommended practice guide 3 on reporting service performance information, which focuses more on how an entity should report on its effectiveness, efficiency, inputs, outputs and outcomes, together with its performance indicators and service performance objectives. And that's some of the things that we discussed earlier in terms of what might be part of a narrative report. Both the IFRS practice statement and the IPSAS recommended practice guides adopt a framework approach based on principles, and this provides flexibility on how to apply them rather than, apologies for that, rather than setting sort of specific individual requirements. I mentioned earlier remuneration and related party disclosures. I mentioned that because that frequently comes up in the context of narrative reporting. And here's a good point to mention that both the ISB and IPSASB have standards on related party disclosures, which require disclosures in the notes to the financial statements of remuneration, including salaries and other benefits, such as benefits of key management personnel in aggregate, and related party disclosures. IFRS for SME also requires related party disclosures, so there is some coverage in the standards. There have also been international developments in recent years around integrated reporting, and in particular, the International Integrated Reporting Council has developed the International Integrated Reporting Framework. This framework provides a non-mandatory principles-based reference for organisations who wish to adopt integrated reporting. They state that the primary purpose of an integrated report is for an organisation to explain to stakeholders how it creates value. And the report aims to provide insight about resources and relationships. The framework talks about capitals, and it covers financial capital, manufactured capital, intellectual capital, human capital, social relationship capital, and finally natural capital. The framework approach enables an organisation to set out its report in its own way rather than adopting a checklist. Similar to other standard setting bodies, the IIRC, International Integrated Reporting Council, has also launched a process to revise the framework. And whilst this framework has been developed for the for-profit sector, integrated reporting could be relevant for NPOs to demonstrate how they seek to optimise their use of available resources and to report on operations to their stakeholders. Just finally touching on what's happening across jurisdictions that we have looked at. And there are differences between jurisdictions in requirements and or guidance that they provide on narrative reporting. We're not aware of any jurisdiction that has a separate standard or standards governing narrative reporting, but there is guidance. One jurisdiction provides guidance on narrative reporting within its overall requirements for accounting and reporting, and it provides for differential narrative reporting that reflects the greater degree of accountability to civil society and stewardship required of larger NPOs. These requirements share much in common with the IASB's management commentary practice statement, so it is quite similar. Another jurisdiction requires principles-based service performance information in line with IFR4NPO's recommended practice guide 3 on service performance reporting, and it too includes differential reporting requirements. But a number of jurisdictions have no general guidance covering narrative reporting, but there are specific requirements to lodge annual information with relevant regulatory bodies. And this might not be aligned with what you might expect to see in general purpose financial reports. So some potential issues there. In part 1 of the consultation paper, we've proposed that narrative reporting is included within the scope of this project. And given the importance of narrative reporting in the NPO context and the amount of existing guidance at both international and jurisdictional level, it could be beneficial to incorporate the development of global narrative guidance in this project. I set that out as context because clearly in response to part 1, there could be a view that this topic is not included within the guidance. And so alternative 1 proposes the continued use of existing guidance relevant in each jurisdiction. So this is effectively a do nothing option and would be in play if the feedback from part 1 proposes that narrative reporting is not included within the project. Adopting alternative 1 would allow individual jurisdictions and organisations to continue to develop their own policies and guidance on narrative reporting, and organisations would be able to voluntarily apply any existing international guidance if that's permitted in their jurisdiction. Alternative 2 provides that an existing international guidance on narrative reporting is applied and tailored as appropriate for reporting in the NPO context. So the difference to alternative 1 is that narrative reporting would be required to accompany the financial statements based on the additional guidance and drawing on that existing international guidance. The additional guidance for NPOs would therefore be consistent with the recommendations of IASB and IFR4NPO, but would have NPO specific examples. Alternative 3 proposes a different path, and instead of using the international frameworks by the standard setters, is to use instead the International Integrated Reporting Council framework. This could be tailored for non-profit organisations to enable a comprehensive view of the organisation's resources and relationships and how it has used these and plans to use these over time. Now, in tailoring for non-profit organisations, this would focus on the needs of their stakeholder groups as kind of a priority. The flexibility inherent in the framework and its standing as an international framework make this worthy of consideration. In this proposal, NPOs would propose an integrated report in line with the IIRC framework, and again, additional guidance would be provided to non-profit organisations to assist in applying the framework. As with the previous topic as well, we've looked at relative advantages and disadvantages of the alternatives. Here we have the advantages. From a technical perspective, alternatives 1 and 2 meet the requirements of the recommended practice of IFRS or IPSAS. Alternative 3 also could meet these requirements, but in addition, it may raise standards to the highest of those that are in corporate reporting. So kind of could create an opportunity for the non-profit sector to lead on this. Practically, alternative 1 would present no change from now, so would be the easiest to implement. Alternatives 2 and 3 offer a clear framework and provide a principles basis for narrative reporting. Alternative 3 provides a great deal of flexibility in how organisations report and would allow the development for narrative reporting over time. Alternative 3 also provides an opportunity to address and change internal management processes to achieve integrated management, which could be in the longer term interests of an NPO. And it's important to draw that out, that using integrated reporting kind of changes the way that management looks at these non-financial issues, so really important. So I think someone has got their mic on. Be appreciated if you could mute that, please, that would be great. From a stakeholder perspective, alternatives 2 and 3 provide a better opportunity for communication with all stakeholders, with improved and fuller understanding of by all stakeholders performance, where the NPO is at and prospects. But alternative 1 offers the advantage of minimising the impact and burdens on NPOs and as a consequence cost because of the no change scenario. In terms of disadvantages, well, from a practical perspective, alternative 1 represents a missed opportunity to develop global best practice on what good narrative reporting should cover. With alternative 2, there may need to be a greater degree of judgment in difficult areas, particularly in forward-looking information and in measures and indicators. And similarly, alternative 3 would involve NPOs in having to apply greater judgment in determining narrative reporting disclosures in difficult areas too. The need to address change in internal management processes could create practical challenges, but if you can address them, they can create an organisational advantage too. From a stakeholder perspective, alternative 1 offers no improvement to the current position, with many jurisdictions having no guidance at all on non-financial reporting. And of course, this would lead to inconsistent approaches across similar entities and across jurisdiction, and fails to reflect the importance of narrative reporting across all sectors and across the world, and the transparency that can result. From a cost-benefit perspective, the narrative disclosures proposed in alternatives 2 and 3 could result in additional cost, and this is probably greater in alternative 3, where there are likely uncertainties about the costs of preparing an integrated report. And it could also place burdens on NPOs to understand and report on issues that go beyond general purpose financial reports. So taking that boundary a bit further could have consequences. There are a list of questions, as with the topic on financial statements. As I've said, the first 4 of those are standard to each of the topics. The additional question on this topic is about whether narrative reporting should be set at a level of a framework and principles, or whether it should have more specific reporting requirements or recommendations in there. So that's an open question on which we would like to hear from people. So as with financial